The Great Hall of the Galactic Council stretched out like a metal canyon. Thousands of alien beings filled the curved seats that rose high into the shadows above. Their voices created a low buzz that echoed off the walls. Some spoke in clicks and whistles. Others used light patterns or chemical signals. The translation devices worked hard to turn it all into understandable speech. Ambassador Elena Vasquez stood at the center of it all. She was a small human woman with graying hair and tired eyes. Around her, creatures towered above her head. Some had crystal bodies that sparkled in the light. Others floated in gas-filled suits or skittered on too many legs. They all looked down at her with the same expression. Boredom mixed with mild annoyance. Elena had been coming to these meetings for 20 years. Every time she asked for the same thing. Every time she got the same answer. Today would be different. Today was the last time she would ask. "Honored council members," Elena began. Her voice carried clearly through the hall's sound system. "I stand before you as the representative of humanity. We have served this council faithfully for 87 years. We have given you our best technology. We have sent our children to fight in your wars. We have built the machines that power your worlds." A ripple of sound went through the crowd. Some aliens clicked their mandibles in what might have been laughter. Others simply ignored her and kept talking among themselves. Counselor Vexithara rose from her seat in the high circle. She was a Zephyrian, one of the oldest species in the galaxy. Her body looked like living crystal, sharp and cold. When she spoke, her voice rang like breaking glass. "Young ambassador," Vexithara said, "your species has indeed been useful. But usefulness is not the same as wisdom. Humans have been space traveling for barely 300 years. The Zephyrians have sailed between stars for 50,000 years. The ethereals have existed since before your son was born." Elena nodded politely. She had heard this speech many times before. "With respect, counselor, age does not always equal wisdom. Sometimes fresh eyes see solutions that old ones miss." Another council member spoke up. This was Yithandra, whose people were made of living light. "Your species is too young, too violent, too unpredictable. You change your minds like weather patterns. How can we trust you with important decisions?" "Violence?" Elena's voice stayed calm, but her hands clenched at her sides. "We ended the Void Swarm invasion of the Kepler systems. Human soldiers died defending worlds they had never seen to protect people they had never met. We asked for nothing in return." "You asked for voting rights," Vexithara said coldly. "Rights that must be earned over millennia, not decades." Elena reached into her jacket and pulled out a small data pad. The gesture made some of the insect-like hunters in the crowd shift nervously. Their compound eyes tracked her every movement. "I want to tell you about Dr. Sarah Chen," Elena said. "She solved the dark matter equation that your scientists had worked on for 1,000 years. It took her 6 months. With her discoveries, you built engines that made your ships 10 times faster." She touched the datapad's screen. "Commander Jackson Torres designed the defensive systems that protect this very station. Without his work, the Void Swarm would have destroyed the Council capital 5 years ago." Elena looked up at the thousands of alien faces around her. "Dr. Chen and Commander Torres are both human. Both are brilliant. Both have been denied the right to speak in this chamber because they belong to a young species. Counselor Zethmore, a slug-like being from the Rim, worlds oozed forward in his mobility suit. Individual brilliance does not make a species ready for governance. Humans are emotional creatures. You make decisions based on feelings instead of logic." "Feelings?" Elena almost smiled. "Let me share some human feelings with you." She activated the datapad. A hologram appeared above her head. It showed star charts, fleet positions, research stations, and colony worlds. Thousands of points of light marked human presence across the galaxy. This map shows every human settlement, every research facility, every fleet position, every strategic asset that humanity controls, Elena said. We are sharing this information with you as a gesture of trust. The hall grew quieter. Even the Yabab aliens who had been ignoring her began to pay attention. For 87 years, we have asked for equal representation in this council. For 87 years, you have told us to wait, to prove ourselves, to earn our place. Elena's voice grew, stronger. Today, I am informing you that humanity's patience has reached its end. Vexithara's crystal body flashed with angry colors. Are you threatening the council, human? I am giving you a choice, Elena replied. In 72 standard hours, you will vote on whether to grant humanity full membership status, voting rights, a seat in the inner circle, equal treatment under council law. The slug being Zethmore made a wet, laughing sound. And if we refuse? What will your little species do then? Elena looked directly at him. If you refuse, you will discover that all the locations on this map have become empty. Every human will leave council space. Every human-built machine will stop working. Every human-designed system will shut down. The hall erupted in noise. Aliens clicked, buzzed, whistled, and flashed in dozens of languages. Some laughed. Others seemed confused. A few looked worried. Impossible, Vexithara declared. You cannot move entire populations in 3 days. Your bluff is transparent. We have been preparing for this possibility for 20 years, Elena said calmly. Every human colony has evacuation plans. Every research station can be packed up and moved. Every ship is ready to leave at a moment's notice. Leave for where? Asked Yithandra. There is nowhere else to go. The galaxy belongs to the council. Elena smiled for the first time since entering the chamber. The galaxy is large, Counselor, and there are other galaxies. The noise in the hall grew louder. Some aliens were clearly alarmed now. Others still seemed to think this was some kind of human joke. Counselor Vexithara raised her crystalline arms. Light blazed from her body, and the hall fell silent. Even if you could carry out this threat, which we doubt, you would be abandoning everything you have built, your homes, your history, your place in galactic civilization. Our place? Elena laughed, but there was no humor in it. What place? We are servants who are not allowed to speak, workers who are not allowed to vote, soldiers who are not allowed to choose which battles to fight. She shook her head. That is not a place worth keeping. The data pad in her hands beeped softly. Elena glanced at it and nodded. The 72-hour countdown has begun, she announced. I suggest you use the time wisely. Elena turned and walked toward the exit. Behind her, the hall exploded into chaos. Aliens shouted at each other in a dozen languages. Some demanded immediate action. Others called for calm discussion. A few were already trying to calculate what would happen if the humans actually left. As Elena reached the door, Vexithara's voice cut through the noise like a blade. You are making a mistake, human. Without the Council's protection, your species will not survive in the wild galaxy. Elena paused at the doorway. She did not turn around. Perhaps, she said. But we would rather die free than live as your servants. The door closed behind her with a soft hiss. In the chamber, the council members stared at each other in stunned silence. None of them believed the humans would actually leave. They were about to learn how wrong they could be. Dr. Sarah Chen stood in her laboratory for the last time. Around her, 20 years of research was being carefully packed into storage containers. Her assistants moved with quiet efficiency, dismantling equipment that had unlocked the secrets of dark matter manipulation. Each piece was tagged, cataloged, and prepared for transport. Are you sure about this, Doctor? Asked her assistant, Marcus. He was young, barely out of university. His hands shook slightly as he disconnected a quantum resonance chamber worth more than most planets. Sarah looked around the lab that had been her second home. Here, she had solved equations that alien scientists had worked on for millennia. Here, she had created technologies that revolutionized space travel. The aliens had used her discoveries to build faster ships, better weapons, more powerful engines. They had never asked her opinion on how to use them. "I'm sure," she said quietly. "Help me with the memory cores. We can't leave any data behind." Across the galaxy, similar scenes played out on 1,000 human worlds. In the shipyards above New Pittsburgh, massive factories that built components for alien fleets simply stopped working. The alien overseers arrived to find empty buildings and silent machines. Signs on the doors read, "Thank you for your business. We have relocated." Captain Maria Santos walked through the corridors of research, Station Alpha 7. Her boots echoed in the empty halls. Every door stood open. Every room was cleaned out. Her crew had worked through the night to strip the station of everything valuable. The fusion reactors were cooling down. The life support systems would shut off in 6 hours. "All personnel evacuated, Captain," reported her second officer. "The last transport ship is ready for departure." Maria nodded. Alpha 7 had been humanity's most important research facility. Here, they had developed the medical nanobots that eliminated disease across 12 alien worlds. They had created the consciousness transfer technology that allowed alien minds to survive in artificial bodies. They had solved problems that the galaxy's greatest minds could not crack. "Set the charges," Maria ordered. "I don't want the aliens to learn anything from what we leave behind." Her officer hesitated. "Captain, destroying the station seems extreme." Maria turned to look at him. "They had 87 years to treat us as equals. They chose not to. Now they can solve their own problems." The transport ship pulled away from the station just as the charges detonated. Alpha 7 disappeared in a brief, bright flash. With it went the only facility in the galaxy capable of producing the medical nanobots that had saved billions of alien lives. On the agricultural world of New Eden, farmer Jack Harrison watched his fields burn. The crops he was destroying had been genetically modified to grow in alien soil types. They could produce 3 times more food than normal plants and resist diseases that killed native crops. Dozens of alien worlds depended on seeds from New Eden to feed their populations. "Seems like a waste," said his daughter, Amy. She was home from university to help with the evacuation. "These crops could feed millions," Jack nodded sadly. "They could, but not for people who think we're too stupid to have a say in how the galaxy is run." He watched the flames consume months of work. "Besides, where we're going, we'll need these genetic templates more than they will." The evacuation was the largest logistical operation in human history. Entire cities were deconstructed piece by piece. Factories were dismantled and loaded onto massive cargo ships. Research equipment was carefully packed and prepared for the long journey ahead. Even cemeteries were excavated, the remains of human ancestors prepared for transport to a new galaxy. Admiral Marcus Webb stood on the bridge of the UES Defiance, watching the organized chaos below. Hundreds of ships filled the space around Earth. Some were massive colony vessels designed to carry thousands of people in suspended animation. Others were cargo haulers, their holds packed with the tools and knowledge needed to build a new civilization. "Status report," Webb ordered. "Evacuation is 93% complete," his operations officer replied. "All outer colonies have been cleared. The industrial worlds are finished. Only Earth and 3 research stations remain." Webb nodded. Earth would be last. It was humanity's birth world, the place where their species had first looked up at the stars and dreamed of reaching them. Leaving Earth felt like cutting out his own heart. "Sir, we're receiving multiple transmissions from Council forces," the communications officer announced. "They're demanding explanations. Some of their ships are moving to intercept our convoys." Are they attempting to board our vessels? Webb asked. No, sir. They seem confused. I don't think they believe we're actually leaving. Webb almost smiled. The aliens had grown so used to thinking of humans as servants that they couldn't imagine humanity having the will or ability to leave. They thought this was some kind of negotiating tactic. They were about to learn otherwise. Admiral, we have a problem, his chief engineer called out. The Council is demanding we turn over the quantum tunnel generators before we leave. They're saying the technology belongs to them since it was developed on Council worlds. Webb's expression hardened. Remind them that Dr. Chen developed that technology. Dr. Chen is human. Dr. Chen is leaving with us. They're threatening to use force if we don't comply. Let them try. Webb turned to his tactical officer. Are the dead manned switches ready? Yes, sir. All human-built systems in Council space are rigged for remote shutdown. If they try to stop us by force, every fusion reactor, every medical facility, every defense platform will go offline simultaneously. Webb nodded grimly. The dead man's switches were humanity's insurance policy. Humans had built or designed most of the critical infrastructure that kept Council civilization running. If the aliens tried to prevent the exodus by force, they would find themselves in the Dark Ages overnight. Dr. Chen's voice came over the ship's communication system. Admiral, this is the Prometheus. We're ready for departure. Webb looked out, at Earth one last time. The blue marble hung in space like a jewel, beautiful and peaceful. Humanity had been born on that world. They had taken their first steps into space from that world. Now they were leaving it forever. All ships, this is Admiral Webb, he announced on the fleet frequency. The evacuation of Earth is complete. Set course for the Andromeda vector. We have a new home to build. The massive fleet began to move. Hundreds of ships accelerated away from Earth, carrying the entire human species toward an uncertain future. Behind them, the dead man's switches activated. Across Council space, human-built, systems began shutting down one by one. In the Council chambers, alarms were starting to sound. The aliens were finally beginning to understand that this was not a bluff. The humans were really leaving, and they were taking everything that mattered with them. Counselor Vexathara stared at the reports flooding in from across the galaxy. Fusion, reactors offline, medical facilities shut down, defense platforms going dark, food production collapsing, communication networks failing. How is this possible? She whispered. Her aide's crystalline features flickered with distress patterns. It appears the humans have been planning this for years. Every critical system has hidden shutdown codes. Every important technology has human-designed components that are now failing. Vexathara felt something she had not experienced in centuries: fear. Can we stop them? Unknown, Counselor. Our fleets are mobilizing, but many of our ships have human-designed systems. We're not sure how many will function properly. On the edge of the galaxy, the human fleet continued its journey toward Andromeda. They carried with them the dreams of their species and the knowledge of 1,000 worlds. Behind them, the Galactic Council was learning the true cost of treating allies like servants. The exodus had begun. There would be no turning back. The first sign of trouble came from the Outer Rim worlds. Counselor Zethmore was reviewing production reports from his mining colonies when the numbers stopped making sense. Output from the antimatter refineries had dropped by 90% overnight. 3 fusion reactors had gone into emergency shutdown. The orbital factories that processed rare metals were operating at barely 20% capacity. What is the meaning of this? Zethmore demanded of his facility manager. His slug-like body oozed agitation, leaving trails of mucus on his mobility platform. The manager, a nervous insectoid creature, clicked his mandibles rapidly. Sir, the human technicians didn't report for their shifts. When we checked their quarters, we found only resignation letters. They took all their personal equipment and left. Resignation letters. Zethmore's eye stalks swiveled in disbelief. In the middle of critical operations? Yes, sir. Very polite ones. They thanked us for the opportunity to serve and wished us well in our future endeavors. Zethmore stared at the production reports. Without human engineers to maintain the antimatter containment systems, the reactors had automatically shut down as a safety precaution. The orbital factories couldn't function without the specialized quantum processors that only humans knew how to calibrate. How long until we can get them running again? He asked. The manager's mandibles drooped. Unknown, sir. The humans took all the technical manuals with them. Our own engineers are trying to figure out how the systems work, but it could take months or even years. Similar reports were flooding in from across Council space. On the medical world of Sanctuary Prime, Dr. Veltar watched in horror as her patient care units began failing one by one. The nanobots that had revolutionized alien medicine required constant calibration. Only human technicians had known the proper procedures. We have 30,000 patients in critical care, Dr. Veltar told her staff. Without the nanobots, half of them will die within the week. Her assistant, a floating gas being in an environmental suit, pulsed with distress colors. Can we contact the human medical teams? Offer them anything they want to return? I've been trying for 6 hours, Dr. Veltar replied. All human communication frequencies are dead. It's like they simply vanished. On the agricultural world of Terra Nova, the enhanced crops that fed billions across the galaxy were already showing signs of distress. The genetic modifications that allowed them to resist disease and grow in alien soil required regular treatment with specialized enzymes. The human agricultural scientists who produced those enzymes were gone. Farm supervisor Clix Andra stared at the wilting fields. Her people had depended on human agricultural technology for 60 years. Without it, their own crops could only feed a third of their population. Sir, we're receiving reports from other agricultural worlds, her assistant announced. The same thing is happening everywhere. Crop yields are collapsing. Clixandra's antennae drooped with despair. How long can we feed our people with emergency rations? Perhaps 6 months if we implement strict rationing immediately. In the council chambers, Councillor Vexathara tried to maintain order as reports poured in from across the galaxy. The scope of the crisis was becoming clear. Humans hadn't just left. They had taken with them the knowledge and expertise that kept galactic civilization functioning. The humans designed our faster-than-light communication network, reported the Director of Communications. Without their quantum entanglement specialists, we're losing contact with outer systems. The network is collapsing sector by sector. What about our defense systems? Vexathara asked. General Thax Iron, a heavily armored warrior from the militant Corvan species, stepped forward. His massive frame was designed for war, but now he looked defeated. 60% of our defensive platforms are offline. The weapons targeting systems were designed by human tacticians. Without them, our platforms can't distinguish between friendly and enemy vessels. Councillor Yithandra's light form flickered with alarm. What do you mean they can't distinguish targets? The human tactical algorithms were incredibly sophisticated. The general explained. They could track thousands of objects simultaneously and make split-second decisions about threat assessment. Our own systems are much simpler. They can shoot at things, but they can't always tell what they should be shooting at. The implications were staggering. Without human expertise, the Council's military was not just weakened, it was dangerous to its own forces. There must be backup systems, Vexathara insisted. Alternative technologies we can use. There are, admitted the Director of Technology, but they're decades behind human innovations. It would be like trying to fight with spears against laser weapons. As if summoned by their fears, new alarms began sounding throughout the chamber. The perimeter defense grid was detecting massive movement in the dark space beyond the galaxy's edge. Long-range sensors showed the distinctive energy signatures of void swarm vessels, Thousands of them. How is this possible? Vexathara demanded. The void swarm was contained. The barrier worlds were holding them back. General Thaxiron's expression grew grim. The barrier worlds relied on human-designed defensive systems. Those systems went offline 3 hours ago. The void swarm was an ancient enemy, a collection of hive-minded creatures that consumed entire worlds. For decades, they had been held at bay by a chain of fortified systems along the galaxy's edge. Those fortifications had been designed and maintained by human military engineers. Can we reactivate the defenses? Yathandra asked. Desperately. Not without the activation codes, the general replied. The humans installed lockout protocols to prevent unauthorized access. Even if we could break the codes, it would take weeks. The swarm will reach the first populated systems in days. Vexathara felt her crystalline form growing cold with fear. In a single day, the humans had reduced the mighty Galactic Council to a collection of helpless primitives. They had taken their technology, their knowledge, and their protection with them into the void. What about negotiation? She asked. Can we contact the humans? Offer them whatever they want? We've been trying, the communications director reported. But we don't know where they went. Long-range sensors detected their fleet heading toward the galactic edge, but then they vanished. We think they may have entered some kind of dimensional fold, technology that only they possessed. The chamber fell silent except for the continuing alarms. The council members stared at each other in growing horror. They had spent centuries believing themselves to be the masters of the galaxy. In one day, they had learned that they were children, playing with toys that only one species truly understood. Sir, a junior aide approached Counselor Zethmore nervously. We're receiving reports from the Kepler systems. Void swarm scouts have been detected moving through the outer planets. They're heading directly for the population centers. Zethmore's slug-like body contracted with fear. The Kepler systems were his people's home worlds. Billions of his species lived there. Without the human-designed defenses, they were completely helpless. Mobilize the fleet, he ordered desperately. Which fleet, sir? The aide asked. Most of. Our ships are still trying to restart their propulsion systems. The human engineers took the startup protocols with them. As the reality of their situation sank in, the council members began to understand the true scope of humanity's final gift to them. The humans hadn't just left. They had shown the galaxy exactly how much it depended on the species it had dismissed, as too young and primitive to deserve respect. In the growing chaos of the council chambers, one small detail went unnoticed. The coffee machines in the diplomatic quarters had also been removed. Even that tiny comfort was gone, leaving behind only empty spaces where human presence had once made life a little better. The reckoning had begun, and it was only the first day. 6 months had passed since the humans left, and the galaxy was dying. Counselor Vexathara stood in what had once been the human embassy on the council's capital world. The building remained intact, but it felt like a tomb. Every piece of technology had been methodically removed. Even the simple things were gone. The coffee makers, the desk lamps, the climate control systems that had kept human diplomats comfortable in the alien environment. The walls were clean, the floors polished. A small placard by the door read, "Thank you for hosting the human embassy for 87 years. We wish you success in your future endeavors." It was signed by Ambassador Elena Vasquez. "How many worlds have we lost this week?" Vexathara asked her aide, without turning around. 17, came the quiet reply. The void swarm has broken through the Kepler defense line. They're moving toward the core systems now. Vexathara's crystalline body flickered with stress patterns. The Kepler systems had been the first line of defense against the void swarm for over a century. The humans had designed defensive platforms there that could destroy entire fleets. When those platforms went offline, the swarm had poured through like water through a broken dam. What about our own fleets? "We lost the 3rd battle group yesterday," her aide reported. Admiral Krextal tried to engage the swarm using traditional tactics. The void creatures adapted to our attack patterns within hours. Without human tactical algorithms, our commanders are fighting blind. It was the same story everywhere. For generations, Council military leaders had relied on human strategic innovations. Humans saw patterns that other species missed. They adapted quickly to changing situations. They found weaknesses in enemy formations that others couldn't detect. Without them, the Council's ancient military doctrines were hopelessly outdated. Dr. Veltar walked through the empty corridors of Sanctuary Prime's main medical facility. Half the building was closed now. Without human nanobots and medical expertise, they could only treat a fraction of their former patients. The morgues were overflowing. "Doctor, we have another epidemic outbreak on Rigel 7, her assistant reported. "The plague is spreading faster than we can treat it." Dr. Veltar closed her eyes in exhaustion. Before the humans left, diseases like this could be stopped with a simple injection of medical nanobots. The tiny machines would identify the plague, organisms, and eliminate them within hours. Now, they were back to using primitive treatments that took weeks and often failed completely. "How many dead?" she asked. 2 million so far. The entire planet might be lost within a month." On the agricultural world of Terra Nova, Supervisor Clixandra watched her people slowly starve. The enhanced crops that had fed the galaxy for decades were dead. Without human genetic expertise, they couldn't reproduce the complex modifications that made the plants viable. Traditional crops could only feed a small fraction of the population. "Sir, we're receiving food shipments from other worlds," her assistant announced hopefully. "How much?" "Enough to feed perhaps 30% of our people for another month." Clixandra's antennae drooped. They had already implemented the strictest rationing possible. People were eating 1 meal every 2 days. Children cried constantly from hunger. The lucky ones would starve slowly. The unlucky ones would be eaten by the creatures their own weakness would attract. In the council chambers, emergency session followed emergency session. But there was nothing to discuss except failure and death. Every day brought new disasters. Every report confirmed what they all knew but refused to say. The galaxy was collapsing without human support. "We could try to rebuild the technologies. Ourselves," suggested Counselor Yathandra. Her light form was dim with despair. "Study the systems they left behind." "With what?" General Thax Iron asked bitterly. "The humans took everything. Every technical manual, every research note, every piece of documentation. They even wiped the computer systems clean." Counselor Zethmore oozed forward on his mobility platform. His homeworld was gone now, consumed by the void swarm 3 weeks ago. Billions of his people had died because their defensive systems no longer worked. "What about the younger species?" he suggested desperately. "The Altarians, the Vegan colonies. Perhaps they have scientists who could help." "They're facing the same problems we are," Yathandra replied. "Everyone depended on human technology. Without it, we're all equally helpless." The terrible irony was not lost on any of them. They had dismissed humanity as too young and primitive to deserve respect. Now they discovered that the young species had been the foundation holding their entire civilization together. "Sir, we're receiving reports from the Outer Rim," an aide announced. "Long-range sensors have detected ship signatures in the direction the humans went. They might be coming back." For a moment, hope flickered in the chamber, but the sensor operator shook his head sadly. "I'm afraid not, sir. The signatures are from void swarm vessels. They're following the same path the humans took toward the galactic edge." Vexathera felt her last hopes crumble. Even if the humans had survived their journey to wherever they went, the void swarm would find them eventually. The ancient enemy followed any trail of technology and life. Nothing escaped them forever. "How long do we have?" she asked quietly. "At current rate of expansion, the swarm will reach the core worlds within 2 years. General Thaxiron reported. Maybe less if they find ways to accelerate their consumption rates. 2 years. In 2 years, the Galactic Council that had ruled for millennia would be nothing but food for an alien hive mind. All because they had been too proud to treat their saviors as equals. Dr. Chen's research notes had mentioned something about consciousness transfer technology, the ability to move a being's mind from a biological body into an artificial one. Several council members had quietly begun investigating whether any of that technology remained functional. If they were going to die, perhaps they could at least preserve their minds. But even those hopes were quickly dashed. The consciousness transfer systems required quantum processing arrays that only humans knew how to build. The few experimental devices that remained operational could only preserve 1 or 2 minds at most. "We could send envoys," Yathandra suggested desperately. "Search for the humans. Beg them to return." "Search where?" Vexthara asked. "They could be anywhere. And even if we found them, why would they help us? We had 87 years to treat them fairly. We chose not to." The chamber fell silent. Outside, the capital city was already showing signs of decay. Without human-maintained systems, the transportation network was failing. Food distribution was breaking down. The carefully balanced ecosystem that supported trillions of beings was falling apart piece by piece. "There is one option, General," Thaxiron said slowly. "We could activate the Doomsday Protocol." Every council member turned to stare at him. The Doomsday Protocol was a theoretical last resort, a way to destroy entire star systems to deny them to the Void Swarm. It had never been used because the cost was unthinkable. "You're talking about destroying our own worlds," Zethmore protested. "Better destroyed than consumed," the general replied grimly. "At least our people would die quickly instead of being slowly digested by the swarm." Vexithara considered the proposal. Billions would die instantly, but it might slow the swarm's advance. Long enough for the remaining population to evacuate to where? There was nowhere left to run. "The protocol requires unanimous consent from all council members," she said finally, "and we would need the activation codes from the Central Archive. The archive systems are human-designed," Yathandra pointed out. "We can't access them without the proper protocols. Even their final desperate option was blocked by their dependence on human technology. They had trapped themselves in a cage built from their own arrogance." In the empty human embassy, a small cleaning robot continued its programmed rounds. It had been left behind, perhaps forgotten in the rush to evacuate. Day after day, it polished floors that no one walked on and cleaned windows that no one looked through. On its chest was a small plaque, "Property of the Human Diplomatic Corps." It was the last human presence in the council capital, a mindless machine tending to an empty building while the galaxy burned around it. The price of pride, it seemed, was everything. Dr. Sarah Chen stood on the observation deck of New Geneva Station and watched the sunrise over humanity's first city in Andromeda. Below her, the planet sparkled with lights from 1,000 settlements. Children who had never seen the Milky Way played in parks designed without alien oversight. Scientists pursued research without committees questioning their worthiness. Artists created works that didn't require approval from species who had never shown humans the same respect. "Any regrets?" asked Director Harrison, joining her at the viewing window. He was one of the original evacuation planners, the man who had figured out how to move an entire civilization across the void between galaxies. Sarah smiled and shook her head. "None whatsoever. Look at what we've accomplished in just 2 years." She gestured toward the planet below. The city of New Geneva was already larger than most council capitals. Human engineering had terraformed 3 worlds in record time. Their technology, freed from alien restrictions and bureaucracy, had advanced at an incredible pace. "The Quantum Tunnel project is ahead of schedule," Sarah continued. "We'll have stable wormhole generation within 6 months. After that, we can explore this entire galaxy without spending decades traveling between stars." Director Harrison nodded approvingly. The colony ships report similar success. New Earth, New Mars, New Tokyo. Every settlement is thriving. Our population is actually growing faster here than it was back in the Milky Way. That was the most remarkable thing about humanity's exodus. Instead of struggling to survive in an unknown galaxy, they had flourished. Without the Council's restrictions on research, human scientists had made breakthrough after breakthrough. Without alien oversight committees slowing down every decision, human engineers had built wonders. President Elena Vasquez walked into her office aboard the orbital command station and reviewed the morning reports. As the first president of the Andromedan Human Republic, she had overseen the transformation of refugees into pioneers. The humans hadn't just survived their exodus, they had created something better than what they left behind. Madam President, we have first contact protocols ready for review, her chief of staff announced. Elena nodded. Long-range sensors had detected signs of intelligent life in several nearby star systems. Unlike their experience with the Council, humanity would approach these new species as equals from the beginning. What do we know about them? The Harmony Collective appears to be a symbiotic species, multiple life forms that work together as a single intelligence. Very advanced biotechnology, but peaceful. The archive keepers are crystalline beings like the Zephyrians, but they seem focused on preserving knowledge rather than hoarding power. Elena reviewed the contact protocols. They were based on mutual respect, shared knowledge, and voluntary cooperation. No species would be considered junior or senior. No one would be denied representation based on their age or origin. Schedule meetings with both species, she decided. Let's show them how first contact should really work. Meanwhile, in the research laboratories of New Prometheus Station, humanity's greatest minds worked on projects that would have been impossible under Council oversight. Dr. Martinez had cracked the code for faster-than-light communication without quantum entanglement. Dr. Patel had developed artificial gravity generators that didn't require massive rotating sections. Dr. Kim had created medical nanobots that could repair genetic damage at the cellular level. It's amazing what we can accomplish when we're not spending half our time explaining why our ideas deserve consideration, Dr. Chen remarked to her research team. She was right. Under the Council system, human scientists had to justify every experiment to committees of aliens who often didn't understand the underlying principles. Promising research was delayed for years, while bureaucrats debated whether humans were qualified to pursue advanced studies. Now freed from those restrictions, human innovation had exploded. The children born in Andromeda were different too. They grew up knowing that their species was valued, that their ideas mattered, that they could dream as big as they wanted without alien overseers telling them to know their place. They learned about the Council only in history classes, as an example of what happens when civilizations lose sight of basic dignity and respect. Captain Torres, now Admiral Torres, commanded the Andromedan Defense Fleet from his flagship, the AHR Independence. His ships patrolled the borders of human space, watching for threats but also ready to assist any species that asked for help. It was a different kind of military than what the Council had maintained, one focused on protection rather than control. "Admiral, we're receiving a distress signal," his communications officer reported. "Source? Unknown alien vessel, heavily damaged. They appear to be refugees fleeing from something they call the Devourers." Torres frowned. The description sounded familiar, but he couldn't place it immediately. "Set course to intercept and have medical teams standing by." When they reached the alien ship, Torres was shocked by what they found. The vessel was clearly of Galactic Council design, but it was barely holding together. Life support was failing. The crew was starving. "This is Admiral Torres of the Andromedan Human Republic," he broadcast. "We're here to help." The response came in broken, desperate tones. "Please. Council world's gone. Void swarm consumed everything. Only survivors left." Torres felt a chill run down his spine. the Void Swarm had broken free. The ancient enemy that humanity had helped contain for decades was loose in the galaxy they had left behind. "Bring them aboard," he ordered. "Give them everything they need." The alien survivors told a horrific story. Without human technology and expertise, the Council's defenses had collapsed completely. The Void Swarm had consumed world after world, turning thriving civilizations into lifeless husks. Billions had died. Entire species had been wiped out. "Why didn't the Council rebuild the defenses?" Torres asked. The lead survivor, a crystalline being who might have been Zephyrian, flickered, with shame patterns. "We tried, but we never understood how human technology worked. We only knew how to use it, not how to build it or repair it." It was the same story throughout the refugee ship. The Council had been completely dependent on human knowledge and innovation. When the humans left, they discovered that their mighty civilization was actually a house of cards built on someone else's foundation. "What about the other species?" Torres asked. "The ones who weren't part of the Council?" "Gone," the alien replied simply. "The swarm consumed them too. As far as we know, these few ships carry the last free beings in the galaxy," Torres reported the situation to President Vasquez immediately. The news sparked intense debate throughout human space. Some argued for launching a rescue mission to save any remaining survivors. Others pointed out that the Council had brought this disaster on themselves through their own arrogance. "We could send medical supplies," suggested the Director of Humanitarian Affairs. "Food, medicine, basic technology to help them survive." "And risk leading the Void Swarm here?" asked the Defense Minister. "If they followed these refugees, we could be putting our own people in danger." Elena listened to the arguments carefully. As she considered the options, her aide brought her a stack of messages from across human space. They were from ordinary citizens, farmers, teachers, engineers, shop owners, all asking the same question: what was the right thing to do? The answer, Elena realized, was obvious. Humanity had left the Council because they refused to be treated as servants. But that didn't mean humans should abandon their values of compassion and assistance. "We help them," she announced. "Not because we owe them anything, but because it's who we are." The rescue operation that followed was the largest humanitarian mission in human history. Ships full of supplies were sent to safe rally points where refugee fleets could resupply. Medical teams treated aliens suffering from starvation and despair. Engineers helped repair damaged vessels. But the humans made one thing clear: they were not coming back to the Milky Way. The galaxy that had rejected them as too young and primitive could face its problems alone. Humanity would help the survivors, but they would not return to save a civilization that had never valued them. Dr. Chen stood once again on the observation deck of New Geneva Station, watching the stars of Andromeda sparkle in the night sky. Somewhere out there, new species waited to be discovered. New worlds waited to be explored. New knowledge waited to be unlocked. Behind her, in the distance invisible to the naked eye, the Milky Way continued its slow rotation. In that galaxy, the Void Swarm continued its consumption of worlds that had once been mighty. The council chambers stood empty. The species that had ruled for millennia were scattered to the stellar winds. A small signal beacon, left behind by the last human ship to leave the galaxy, continued its endless broadcast. "We tried to be your partners. You insisted on making us your servants. Now, you can be your own everything." Sarah smiled and turned away from the window. There was work to do, a new civilization to build, a new galaxy to explore, and this time, they would do it right from the beginning. The humans had left while the council watched. By the time the council realized what they had lost, it was far too late to undo the damage. But for humanity, it wasn't an ending. It was a beginning.